Alzheimer's disease now affects more than 7 million Americans, and a new report from the Alzheimer's Association sheds light on how people feel about getting diagnosed even before symptoms start. Joining us today is Dr. Elizabeth Eggerly with the Alzheimer's Association to break down the latest findings on what they mean for families everywhere. Good morning, doctor. Good to see you.
Oh, good to see you. Thanks, Melissa.
All right, so I want to begin by talking about the new Alzheimer's Association's Facts and Figures report. I think this is really important. Let's share with our viewers what it uncovered.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we are now over 7 million Americans living with Alzheimer's disease. That's up by 300,000 people over last year. So now we're at an all-time high of 7.2 million Americans. And right alongside them are 12 million family and friends who act as caregivers. So when we add all those numbers up, we also see that there's tremendous costs associated with that too. We're at $384 billion that we spend annually on Alzheimer's, and that's an increase of $24 billion in just this last year alone.
Okay, that's a lot. All right, so let's talk further though too about what this year's survey really reveals about how Americans feel about diagnosis and treatment options.
Yeah, so we surveyed adults over the age of 45 to get a sense of what their attitudes were about, for example, taking a simple blood test. Would people be interested in taking a blood test to find out that they had Alzheimer's? And overwhelmingly, the answer was yes. Over 90% of people said, yes, I would do a blood test. And 80% of those people said they especially wanted to find out early, like early as in before the symptoms occur or while the symptoms are mild. And the reason for that is they want to access treatments and start to do things to slow the progression of the disease, to catch it early.
Okay, is there anything that it revealed about Idaho specifically?
Yeah, so in Idaho, we also are seeing this as a major issue across the state. We have 30,000 individuals living with Alzheimer's disease and 73,000 family members and friends acting as caregivers. So together, that's 100,000 people where Alzheimer's is part of their daily life, day in, day out.
Okay, so let's talk about the biggest concerns that people have when it comes to getting tested for Alzheimer's. Why is this information, this data that we're discussing today, so important?
Well, as I said, people really want to find out early because they want to be able to do something about it. The concerns we heard from, not the majority, but some expressed concerns about, well, if I get tested, A, is that going to be covered by insurance? And B, what about the treatments? Are those going to be covered? Aside from those concerns, though, we heard that people really want access to the new treatments that have come out. There are 2 treatments that have the potential to slow the disease progression, and then other treatments that could improve symptoms, or they want to engage in things like education and support around lifestyle changes. So we see people wanting to take control over Alzheimer's. If they're facing that, they want to get in there early and do something.
Okay, and then you're talking about treatments too, so let's talk a little bit more about that. What types of treatments are Americans most interested in? And then also, are people hopeful about the future of dementia treatments?
Yes, so there are different types of treatments, as I mentioned. The first that people are most interested in, not surprisingly, are treatments that can slow the progression of the disease. These treatments actually remove a protein from the brain and kind of do a little bit of cleanup there to buy people more time, especially in the early stages. What was interesting, Melissa, is that we also heard that people were willing to even accept some risk, moderate to even very high levels of risk, which was interesting. But what it tells us is that they are interested in taking advantage of these new developments, and they were also very hopeful about future developments. They expect in the next 10 years that more treatments will emerge, and they want to be able to access those too.
Okay, all right, and I know here in Idaho, we're taking a look at some of the information that you had mentioned. You know, 7.2 million Americans living with Alzheimer's, nearly 12 million serving as dementia caregivers. So that just kind of, once again, reinforces the size of the impact of what we're talking about today here, Doctor. And then more than 9 in 10 would want a simple test if it was available. You had mentioned blood tests. In addition to the blood test, what's the typical type of test that somebody might get if they're concerned that they might be developing some kind of cognitive impairment like Alzheimer's?
Yeah, and because these blood tests are not widely available, they're not going to be in your doctor's office unless you're in a research center or a specialty clinic. What a diagnosis looks like now is people go in and they start talking to their doctor about concerns. They share if they have memory changes or communication difficulties or other changes in their functioning on a day-to-day basis. And then what happens is the doctor does medical tests to see about their general health. They may do some brain scans, and they also do cognitive testing. In some cases, people will even get a sophisticated test like a PET scan that can light up amyloid in the brain, indicative of Alzheimer's. But most of us are going to end up with cognitive tests and medical tests and come away after sometimes months or even more than a year before we find out whether we have Alzheimer's. It's a lengthy process, and everyone would be interested in making that much more efficient and even having more confidence in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can only imagine, when you are faced with the potential of having a disease like Alzheimer's and having to go through all these processes, especially a year, just to even try to get a diagnosis and one that you trust, that can be maybe even traumatic for some people, but a lot of stress.
Absolutely, and it's much more common to have that experience than to have it go quickly. I'm sad to say. So that's why we're so excited to see that it looks like blood tests could be on the horizon.
That'd be amazing.
So if it's like the next year or two, doctors still are going to have to look and do a full workup. But if they knew they had a blood test, they're going to feel more comfortable and confident, and so are we. So we think that there could be some really great advancements in the years to come.
That is super exciting. Okay, so where can people go so they can learn more, not only about the advancements that are taking place as we speak and should hopefully be available to people here in the very near future, but also maybe some of those red flags for Alzheimer's, what they can do here and now to stay on top of a potential diagnosis or how to manage a diagnosis that already exists?
Yes, so go to alz.org, the Alzheimer's Association website, and there's fantastic information about the 10 warning signs. There's also 10 healthy habits to maintain a healthy brain. There's a whole array of research information, and you can even look up the survey I was talking about, the Facts and Figures report. There's so much out there, and you also have local resources in Idaho to help people 24/7. There's a helpline. Reach out. We're there to help support you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciate your time, and
Thank you.
Really, really appreciate you sharing this very important information.